Capitol Report is a production of Senate Media Services.
Minnesota is facing a surge in violent crime, and lawmakers are concerned. This week, key lawmakers provide their perspectives on the rising incidence of criminal activity. Stay tuned for this and more on this week's Capitol Report. Welcome to this week's program. I'm Shannon Loehrke. Two key Senate committees held an informational hearing recently to hear from law enforcement officials about the increase in violent crime.
We saw huge increases in violence in August and September of 2019, putting us on pace to where we are now, both in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And for those of us that have heard people say, well, it's because of the pandemic, I want to assure you that it began before then.
We have seen an increase in burglaries, theft from vehicles, and vehicle thefts that involve non-Maple Grove residents, juveniles that have suspects have gang ties, and they are carrying weapons. Our intelligence shows that these offenders involve multiple agencies, and they are impacting the safety in our neighborhoods.
Our job is to find bad guy, arrest sane. When we do, imagine how frustrating that is if you're the arresting officer and before you finished your report, that person's back out on the street. And they don't have the mindset of thinking that they're getting a second chance, so they're going to reform. They continue to commit more crime.
For an agency my size, I don't have a lot of personnel that I have that can do some of those specialty items, so I have to dual purpose my deputies, and that puts a strain on them. I can tell you that they're hesitant to do their job. They are feared of being prosecuted for making an error, fear of being harassed for doing their jobs based on political immediate response. They're concerned about the deadly force statute and where that will go. They're concerned about the discussions about qualified immunity being taken away. All this weighs on our deputies and officers in the state of Minnesota.
Senator Scott Newman is the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, and I spoke with him this week. What did you take away from this hearing?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's nice to see you again. I'm going to do my very best to answer all of your questions, as thoroughly as I can in the time that we have available. What did I take away from the hearings? Number one, confirmation from law enforcement that crime is in fact escalating, and it has become more and more dangerous for the police that are out on the street. It is more and more dangerous for our public to be out on the street. And for my constituents out in what I affectionately call cornfield country, I want them to know that the crime and the increased crime that they see in the urban areas will, and I believe is going to affect their public safety. You can't have a dramatic increase in crime like we have in Minneapolis and St. Paul, the two biggest cities in the state, without it also affecting the ring suburbs and ultimately out into rural Minnesota. So this unfortunate increase in crime is going to affect all of us statewide, and we simply have to get a better handle on it. That was my confirmation, my takeaway from what law enforcement told us.
Ramsey County Sheriff Bob Fletcher told the committee that the trend of increased criminal activity began before the COVID-19 pandemic and before the murder of George Floyd. So back in 2019, this trajectory began. And if that is the case, then what can be done to reverse the trend, thereby allowing these communities to regain a sense of safety?
For years now, we have been more and more lenient with folks who commit crimes. There's a small percentage, in my opinion, a small percentage of people who commit crimes. And we have been increasingly lenient with them when it comes to bail. It's just a revolving door. The cops arrest them, they put up bail, and they're back on the street. folks increasingly are being given probation with no jail time. We are seeing youngsters, 13, 14 years old, that begin committing crimes by first they're stealing cars, then they're doing carjackings, and then that leads to the more violent crime. In my world, Shannon, illegal actions, bad conduct has consequences. It has consequences. And if you are going to be someone who wants to commit a crime in Minnesota, there has to be consequences for that. And we have to stop being so lenient on what has occurred within our criminal justice system. And we have to stop blaming the cops for all of the wrongful conduct. The cops aren't initiating this wrongful conduct. They get a role to play, and they certainly have they have to do a better job in community relations. That's not what I'm talking about. If you commit a crime in Minnesota, I think you should go to jail. And there are many, many crimes, particularly property damage crimes. There's no consequences.
Well, this brings up the issue of prosecutorial and judicial discretion. You have been critical of Ramsey County Attorney John Choi's decision not to prosecute felony charges that stem from what are often referred to as pretextual stops, or traffic stops that don't involve public safety, like for a broken taillight or expired tabs. According to my research, both Minneapolis and St. Paul are in favor of this decision. Other communities are considering adopting policies like this. But what is the legislature's role then in helping to determine the bail and whether charges are brought and all of that? Is there a role for the legislature?
There absolutely is a role for the legislature. But to begin to answer your question, cast it in the light of the immediate past question that you just answered me, the increasing crime in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And in Minneapolis and St. Paul, yes, the county attorney in Hennepin County, the county attorney in Ramsey County are in favor of not prosecuting folks who have committed an illegal act while driving. Look at the word pretext. Pretext means a ruse. It means a pretense. Police officers should be justifiably upset with County Attorney Freeman and County Attorney Choi for using that kind of terminology, because it puts the cops in a position where apparently they believe they are stopping people on a ruse or on a pretense just to stop them. Sheriff Fletcher specifically denied that these legal stops for a traffic violation were being done by targeting blacks. He said that's not true. I believe him. I think that police officers have an obligation to enforce the laws that the legislature passes. That's the legislator's role. We have passed certain laws that says, if you drive under these circumstances, this conduct is illegal. Law enforcement has to do something about it because we passed that law. County attorneys have jurisdiction to prosecute claims because the legislature created the county attorney position. And in that creation of the law, that body of law, it says that county attorneys have a duty, this is a legal duty, to prosecute claims. John Choi is not fulfilling his legal duty. He has taken the step to refuse to enforce an entire body of law, i.e. these traffic violations, which if you talk to law enforcement, these traffic violation stops often lead to much more serious crimes that they are able to solve. And just talk to some of the sheriffs and chiefs of police in surrounding the metropolitan area. John Choi does not have uniform support of his policy. And in my view, if John Choi is not going to perform his legal duty, if he's not going to do his job, then I think he should resign.
Let's talk about law enforcement for a moment, because several of the officials before the committee spoke of declining officer morale and fear among officers of making mistakes. It was also mentioned that recruiting new officers has become more difficult. We know that for a variety of reasons, there are not enough officers in St. Paul and Minneapolis. Is the funding adequate, and how can the morale problem be solved?
The only funding jurisdiction that the Transportation Committee has is with the Highway Patrol. And the Transportation Committee fully funded the Minnesota State Highway Patrol. We gave them absolutely everything they asked for. They wanted money for their trooper academy. They wanted salary increases. They have a laundry list of requests. And you talk to Colonel Langer, and he will absolutely agree with me that the legislature gave him everything that he asked for. That is not true in Minneapolis, and it's not true in St. Paul. They're starving the police departments for money. Consequently, my figures are going to be close, but I think that Minneapolis is supposed to have about 800 cops. As of a year ago, they were down to 200. So they're down to about 600. As of a few weeks ago, they were down another 100 or so. So you don't have enough police on the street in Minneapolis to do the job. The same thing is going on in the city of St. Paul. There's not enough cops on the street to do the job because the city councils in both of those two cities are squeezing the funding. They're stopping the funding. So they're not adequately funded. The state patrol is adequately funded. And I invite you to talk to Colonel Langer about that. Are the police afraid? Absolutely, they're afraid. They're afraid because the consequence of the city councils in Minneapolis and St. Paul and the county boards in Ramsey County and Hennepin County, they're not supporting the police. They are emboldening the criminals. It is becoming more and more dangerous for the cops out on the street. And they are gradually coming to the realization, the decision, why should I put myself and my family in jeopardy if the people we are protecting don't have our back?
Senator
You
Newman.
indeed are seeing moral the decline in their morale, because it's real and it's there.
Senator Newman, we're going to have to leave it there, but I want to thank you so much for your time.
You are very welcome.
Senator Ron Latz is the minority lead of the Senate Judiciary and Public Safety Committee. He joined me this week to offer his views on the recent hearing with law enforcement officials about the increase in violent crime. What was your takeaway from the law enforcement perspectives presented at that joint hearing?
Hi, Shannon. Good to be with you again. What was striking to me was how much law enforcement agreed with our criticism of the hearing, which was that they alone cannot provide public safety. They need the community-wide efforts and assistance on this from a broad range of providers and workers and helpers, not only to respond to immediate calls of violence, but also to provide mental health care, to have mental health responders, to have social workers responding, to have community leaders participating, including supporting and helping people to give evidence and information that they know about crimes that have happened. It's a community-wide effort. And we have, for far too long, relied solely on the police to try to prevent crime and respond to criminal activity in the community. And they just can't do it all, whether their numbers are at full strength or their numbers are depleted.
So you were, as you said, you were critical of the scope of this hearing. You said that it was too narrow. So if you were the chair of the Judiciary Committee and had called an informational hearing on the rise of criminal behavior and lawlessness, what would you have wanted to hear? Who would you want to have heard from?
Well, I would have wanted to hear from the law enforcement representatives directly, because theirs is a valuable and important, even critical voice in this. But it's not the only important voice. So I would have wanted to hear from advocates relating to mental health issues. for social workers. I'd want to know more about who the sort of frequent flyers are in terms of police calls, not necessarily who gets arrested and put in prison, but who's absorbing, disproportionate share of police resources. I'd want to hear from community leaders directly about what their perspectives are on why people are committing more crime, including more violent crime, and what they think ought to be done to respond to it. And part of it is not just getting that input, but it's having those people all talk with each other. And importantly, the community voices, so that there's more trust between the community and law enforcement. Only with that trust can we hope to solve crimes that have already occurred and perhaps get a handle on reducing the crimes in the first place.
Senator Warren Limmer is the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and he wrote an opinion that was published in the Star Tribune where he wrote that the state already has the laws necessary to curb criminal behavior. He said that prosecutors and judges are failing in pressing charges and upholding sentencing. In particular, he called out Ramsey County Attorney John Choi, who has decided not to prosecute felony crimes that result from pretextual traffic stops. What is your view on all of this?
Well, first of all, I read Senator Limmer's op-ed piece, and it was just a partisan attack through and through. To me, it was not a real deeply thought through attempt to solve or identify the problems relating to criminal conduct in our society. I vigorously disagree with the conclusion or the assertion that our prosecutors and our judges are not vigorously prosecuting and sentencing criminal conduct, criminal convictions. There are cases, and the prosecutors have a duty in cases to try to do justice, not just to bring the hammer down on everyone who's accused of committing a crime. And sometimes prison or jail is not the best result. Sometimes the best result is drug or alcohol evaluation and treatment. Sometimes it's restorative justice in the community. Sometimes it's mental health care or services. Sometimes it's a community work service, and especially in times of COVID, when putting people in prison can be a death sentence because if they may have underlying conditions or other reasons, we're particularly sensitive to that. Now, there are certain prosecutorial standards, and I know that Senator Limmer and Senator Newman called out County Attorney Choi, and I don't interpret County Attorney Choi's new policy as giving a pass to felons. The whole purpose of that policy is to not reward police officers who are committing pretextual stops by trying to say, don't commit the stops, but if you do stop people for having something hanging from the rear view mirror or having a tail light out or brake light out during the day, we're not going to reward that by prosecuting, felonies that are discovered as a result, because that would completely undermine the goal of reducing the pretextual stops. If there are, and I should also note, these are non-public safety related stops that County Attorney Choi was dealing with. So it's not talking about bad driving conduct, not talking about going 50 miles an hour in a 30-mile zone. It's not talking about weaving across lanes or running red lights or failing to stop at stop signs. That's all more dangerous driving conduct, and they would continue to be fully supported stops, and whatever is discovered as a result would still be prosecuted under County Attorney Choi's policy. But the pretextual stops, the ones where cops are just looking for a non-public safety related excuse to pull someone over in the hopes that they're going to do a search, do the quote unquote smell of marijuana, which justifies emptying the car out, tearing it apart, looking for contraband. That's the kind of stuff that not only leads to a lot of conflict and distrust between communities of color who are disproportionately targeted by these stops, but also has a very, very low rate of results for finding felony level contraband. It's under 1%. I think police resources would be much better spent targeting the likely locations of contraband and felony offenses.
I'd like to just take a moment before we have to go to talk about guns, because the St. Cloud Chief of Police, Blair Anderson, told the committee that officers are increasingly encountering people with firearms who are not authorized to carry them. You have advocated for a long time for stricter gun laws, including on this program. We've spoken about it. In the meantime, though, what should be done to address the volume of weapons that are already available to criminals and others through back alley channels?
Well, I think we need to strengthen our gun laws in terms of the background checks to close the loopholes where people are illegally purchasing guns without going through background checks. We need to have a robust system for removing firearms from people who are showing signs that they are dangerous to themselves or to others, having the courts make that determination. That's the extreme risk protection order. And I've authored over the years plenty of legislation to toughen the criminal penalties relating to guns and gun possession and gun use. But the fact is that's not enough. And pretextual stops is not the solution because it's such a low success rate in finding those guns of violence. What we need, I think, is to not only make sure we've got plenty of robust police enforcement that are out there in the community so people know if they use guns, they're going to get caught. That's the likelihood of being caught for committing the illegal conduct. That's a huge deterrent to using the guns in the first place. But we also need to have communities willing to take the risk, frankly, and turn in violent criminals. There are people all over the communities that know who used the gun at the party, know who shot the kid, know who got in the gunfight on the street. And they're afraid to tell the police what happened because they don't think the police are going to have their back or protect them. And they're afraid of what will happen within the community in terms of retaliation for talking to the police. We need to break that cycle. And I think when we do that, when we don't have people in the community looking the other way, when they see people and know people who have firearms and are using them, then the people who have them and use them are going to know they can get away with it. And that's where I think the focus needs to be. The penalties are plenty tough already. I don't think that's enough of a deterrent because people don't think they're going to get caught. That's where we need to get.
Senator Ron Latz, I want to thank you so much for your time today.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Shannon.
The Minnesota State Capitol, as we now know it, is actually the third public building to manage the state's business. Here's a look at the history of Minnesota's state houses. The Minnesota State Capitol has been restored to its original grandeur, but this is not where the first legislature met. Where did they meet?
They met in the Central House, which would have been during the territorial years, 1849. And that was in downtown St. Paul, pretty much just a log building with a clapboard siding. And that was the first session was held there. Then they met until they could build a first Capitol building in different locations, different hotels throughout St. Paul until 1855 when that first Capitol building opened.
And what happened to the first Capitol building?
Yeah, that was really a neat little Capitol for a territory or the early size of the state of Minnesota as it became a state in 1858. It was a brick and wood building, had a nice little white dome on top of it, wooden dome. And then as the state expanded, as government got larger, they kept adding wings to it and added additional sections to it. So it lost its dome, had a cupola, and then by the 1870s added a couple more extensions to the building. And in 1881 it burned down. So many states have that story as part of their history, and Minnesota also lost the Capitol to a fire.
So the first Capitol building burned down. They built another one. What happened to that one?
Well, that was built on the same location, and that one was had a big turret, kind of a big tower in the center that accommodate the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court. And one of the problems with that, partly because of the haste to replace the burned down Capitol with another building, the ventilation wasn't working very properly, so people who were working there, legislators, were getting sick. The state was still expanding governmental-wise, commissions were being created and so forth, so they needed more space, a larger space to conduct the state government.
Midwestern folks are known for their modesty, and yet behind us we have this incredibly glorious building. How did the legislature decide to go with something so monumental?
Well, this was an important reflection of what was happening in America, and especially in architecture and public buildings. The World's Columbian Exposition of 1893 was a big inspiration for a lot of young architects and city leaders who were going to this World's Fair, and they were being inspired by these white, beautiful Italian Renaissance buildings with columns and domes and colonnades and everything that you would see that would be a classical representation of democracy or government, several hundred years ago. And so they were inspired to build buildings like this. And that was one of the specifications for this building when they sent out the requirements for the competition for architects to submit drawings. They wanted a dome, a fairly prominent dome. They wanted columns, they wanted pediments, things that you would see in these buildings in Europe, and also that were being built all over the United States.
Cass Gilbert was ultimately chosen to be the architect of the building. How did the legislature choose him?
Well, he was selected by the Board of Capital Commissioners, and so they were the group of 7 people who were charged with overseeing the entire project. So they, along with Gilbert, was one of 41 competitors to submit a drawing or drawings with, to follow the specifications required, and based on what they liked about his, flow of the space within the building, the location of the chambers, the architectural elements were all included as part of his design. So he was selected because of that. Ability to kind of communicate what they thought would be exactly what the state needed.
Rather than downtown St. Paul, why did they choose this site for the Capitol building?
Well, I think by 1890s, the size of the Capitol Square was just too small for what they wanted for this ambitious building project. And part of it is you want a more grandeur space and a grand location for the Capitol. And what was then here it's called Wabasha Hill. And so this is a little bit farther from downtown, but still close enough to be connected. And you have really a nice little prominent hill that you can build the Capitol on, so it kind of stands above the rest of St. Paul. So that was one of the main reasons, was more of the geographical location and its appearance, or how it would appear once it was constructed.
How much was originally appropriated, and how much did the state actually spend on the building?
Yeah, the Capitol was a 9-year construction period, and so it cost $4.5 million to do all of that work. And it came actually as built in stages. So the first appropriation was about $2 million, and then they had additional funding that because labor went up, the cost of materials went up, so they needed to go back to the legislature 2 different times to get the amount of money that they needed to make it what you see today.
Join us again next week as we delve into more topics affecting Minnesotans. I'm Shannon Loehrke, and on behalf of all of us at Senate Media Services, thanks for watching.